Hi, I'm Tim.
And I'm John. Thank you to the folks at Wired for inviting us to talk to you this morning. We're here to talk to you about a change that's happening on the web. It's a change we are very excited about, and as Greg mentioned, we actually founded a company called Inrupt to help make it happen. And it's a change that's got big implications for all of us as consumers, as citizens, as business people, and actually as members of society. So today, what Tim and I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about is what's driving this change. But then what we really want to focus on is what these changes will really mean for the way we all experience the web and the way we can build businesses and in some cases whole economies on this new web. And we'll describe some early projects that are already underway around the world to make this happen. We'll also spend some time, Greg, talking about everybody's favorite buzzword at the moment, which is Web3. But first, some basics. Tim and I founded our company Inrupt about 5 years ago now. And our mission with Inrupt is to help the world experience the benefit of the technology that Tim's developed called Solid. Now, Tim, I've heard you describe Solid as an evolution of the web. And so maybe you could tell us a bit more about why you think it's an important step.
Sure. First of all, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us. Yep, I think Solid represents an important new phase, new era of the web. It's already brought about significant changes and has positively impacted the evolution of the web in fundamental ways this way. Solid in fact adds 3 new standards to the web. First of all, Solid gives us a standard for global sign-on. So you can, when you sign on with Solid, you can sign on anywhere to anybody can sign on to anything. Something which we didn't have before. Secondly, it gives us global access control. So if everybody has Solid IDs that they got from a Solid login, then you can use that to give them access to anybody access to anything or nothing. Thirdly, the standards are a universal API. That's a protocol for apps to read and write data from any store, from any personal data store. So personal data stores, we call them Solid pods for short. Who's heard of a Solid pod before? Okay, so for those who haven't, a Solid pod it's just personal cloud storage. It's like a USB key in the sky, if you like. You can store stuff on it and share it with whoever you want. Just share data in your pod. You allow a person or an app access to that specific bit of data. But you can revoke that access at any time. You can also store data in your pod that you don't want to share with anyone. The apps store stuff in your pod using standards so that you can use lots of different apps to access the same piece of data at once. So that's a huge improvement. With all the apps now having the ability to read the same data, your data is no longer stuck in those silos of various apps and organizations, all the different social network, so the back ends of all the big companies. In essence, Solid makes us realize that the walled gardens that we were so familiar with are so frustrating and restrictive. When data is under control of the individual and lives in a common format that all applications can understand, then collaboration and communication and commerce can all move back to that open world of web standards that be very much empowered.
Universal digital identity, control over data, no more walled gardens. A lot of what you're talking about sounds familiar with the current buzzword of Web3. So is Solid Web 3?
Nope. Really, absolutely not. Actually, Web 3 is not solid. It's important to clarify this. In fact, you know, if we're going to discuss the future, if we're going to discuss the potential impact of new technology, we really have to understand what terms mean and discuss, so we discuss the reality of what they mean beyond the buzzwords. And it's a shame that the actual Web3 name has been taken by a bunch of folks, the Ethereum folks, for the stuff they're building on top of blockchain. Web3 is not the web, actually. It's blockchain. Solid is not blockchain. Solid is not Web3. The blockchain protocols, they're not good for solid pods. Blockchain is too slow. It's too expensive. It's too public. So actually, it's not Web3. You can call it Web 3.0, we've been calling it Web 3.0, but it's not Web 3. So it's Web 3.0 in the sense that the original Web 1.0 gave you a sort of a web of integrated HTML pages. You could click between static documents. And then Web 2.0 came along with JavaScript, dynamic HTML pages, and then the programs running in those pages would store data in the back ends of the big platforms like Facebook and Twitter. And so the point is that the Web plus Solid is a much more of an improved web, version 3.0, which hopefully will fix, and is fixing, a bunch of issues which we've seen with Web 2.0. So the Web 3.0 with solid protocols is the next layer people are seeing as a huge improvement, a sort of mid-course correction, taking the web to where actually some of us have always wanted it to go in the first place.
Okay, so now we've got the correct term, Web 3.0. Let's talk a bit more about the problems that Web 3.0 is meant to solve, and actually what those solutions look like so far. The core of the problem with Web 2 is that although all of our data flows through the web, it actually doesn't take advantage of the web. I mean, the web is all about easy access and interoperability. A single web page, as we talked about earlier, that can be accessed millions of times in a multitude of different ways. So making information reusable was, I think, Tim's stroke of genius. But every time a company puts out a new app, they build a custom back-end database and start the process of collecting user data, and they do it over and over again. And you know, heaven forbid that they ever want to change what the data's there to do, because you know, reconstructing the back end for a different context could be months of work, a lot of development effort, maybe new APIs, new integrations. And actually, along with all of that comes the millions of dollars people are spending on security and privacy to make sure they keep it all safe, secure, they're compliant with all the regulations. So actually, notwithstanding what the web was invented to do, we're treating it like a single-use construct. And as a consequence, corporations are building around these data silos. And users spend, I know I do, half their life on the web filling in repetitively the same information about themselves. Website after website, app after app. So now we've got a crazy scenario where the corporations the world over are spending billions of dollars scraping together data that they can get about us, trying to keep it safe when what they'd rather be doing is sticking to their core competencies. And it also leads to governments spending billions of dollars duplicating effort because they treat us, again, out of back-end silos, many different back-end silos. And agencies don't interoperate very easily at all. Excuse me.
So this single-use approach to data, at least some of us wider societal problems that have plagued the web recently, like the monopolies the surveillance capitalism, and indirectly fake news. Consumers found themselves locked into certain platforms because they couldn't reuse their own data elsewhere. The result was a big data race between the big platforms, but the winner is the one that controlled the most data, and the loser is everybody else. So all this meant that our data was stuck in systems that we, as citizens or as consumers, couldn't control. That's how we ended up with an online economy that used data to exploit people instead of benefiting them. That's why web users provided all the valuable stuff, the data, we got so little return for it. Some companies will claim that their algorithms are better than you are for knowing what you want, but you know what? That approach, it runs counter to the basic self-empowerment philosophy of the web. So no matter how much data we collect on each other, our approach to data is fundamentally broken. Data today doesn't benefit from the web's principles of open access, individual empowerment. But the good news is that the web itself is ready to be the solution to those problems.
Yeah, Web 3.0 will unlock the next wave of opportunity for us all. As individuals, for organizations that want to service us, corporations and governments, and for innovative developers who can invent new ways to glue it all together. Now, we can't predict the future, but it is instructive to look back at how other major technologies have changed the fundamentals of business and society. I mean, the web itself famously brought the cost of software distribution down to next to zero around the world. Suddenly, if you could build software that could serve the needs of users, you could deliver that globally and simultaneously, pretty much, to users all over the world for next to nothing. And companies that understood that early on became the global tech giants, some of them we know today. They were able to aggregate billions of users all over the world faster than anybody could have imagined, gather data about them, and that's made them huge control points of the entire internet for over a decade now. And then cloud computing brought the cost of upfront compute and storage down again to next to zero. So now you could operate software products cheaper and faster. You no longer needed to invest millions of dollars in server rooms to service your customers. You were able to cheaply operate at scale, at massive scale, all around the world, and all you needed to do was to rent the compute and the storage you needed exactly when you needed it. And again, the companies that caught on to this early on, again, outpaced everybody else. They could scale their infrastructure faster than anybody else. And they too became big giants. But those twin phenomena have led to pretty gruesome, unexpected consequences. Now, for zero cost, pretty much, you can distribute your product and service to users all over the world, gather masses of data about them. So that's what companies did. But along the way, we never figured out a common way to organize all the data. So every organization, every app maker, built their own way to do it. And that's making it impossible to share and reuse data within organizations, actually across economies, across different parts of our lives as users. When you think about it, it's a crazy system. It's certainly not the way the web was intended. But Web 3.0, built on Solid, fixes those problems. Solid now brings the cost of sharing data, again, to zero, because it's a common way to store data and to access it. And actually, most importantly, it gives direct connection to users, for us as individuals and for companies to us. They don't have to guess about us anymore. They can start to understand us. You know, there's a marketing expression at the moment, zero-party data. And that's part of what you get with Solid. A user can give you access to data about them so that you can better service them. So we all enjoy a better relationship with all these organizations. And it's zero cost to users because we don't need to keep re-entering all this information. And we're clear on what happens to our data because it doesn't get whisked away. And there's also no vendor lock-in. Vendors that get to compete based on their ability to provide quality products and services. And it's also zero cost for developers somewhat because now they don't need to worry about back-end development issues. We're talking about a common API, a common data standard, and a way to tie data explicitly to individual consumers. And the shift couldn't come at a better time, actually, because when you consider IoT devices and the rapid rise of those, they're all around us, right? There's masses of data about us. It's being generated at an unprecedented rate, but there's no way for us to access it. And there's certainly no common way for us to share it. And every IoT device, again, is like its own computer. It's building its own database. So there's hardly any way for all that data to interoperate. So the problem's getting worse, not better. The biggest Web 2.0 companies were built on data moats, but they're going to dry up. Not immediately. They're smart companies and they've got lots of resources, but it's going to happen. And instead, the winners in this new web will be the companies that can give users the best experience. And they'll have the advantage of access to the full spectrum of user data in order to do it. It's a world where micro-personalization will be the norm. It's a world where zero-party data will be the norm. It's a world where people and technology will actually start to work together in harmony. Now, if you think this is all pie in the sky, let me correct something for you, because it's happening now. We started the company 5 years ago, and we've been fortunate to be working with some truly capable people around the world, and as a consequence of which we're at the cusp of those organizations beginning now to release what they've built on Solid. And we're talking about an array of companies. We're talking about insurance companies who can now deliver much better services as a consequence of users being more relaxed about what they share about themselves. We're talking about telecommunications carriers who can deliver much better services to us all as users with our phones and our in-home devices. We're talking about retailers who now can treat you not as a transactional consumer, but as somebody who has a relationship with them, where they can deliver you much better services. Banks, media companies. It's a truly inspirational time to see how these organizations are able to build new and innovative ways to service us. And I have some pet projects, actually. There's one we're working on in the US with a company that helps disadvantaged apartment owners to help them figure out how to get better service out of the utilities that are provisioned for them in their homes. And they do it in a green way. It's a fabulous, fabulous project. Here in the UK, you should soon see a media company who's releasing a way for you to experience a much more interactive way to see content that they provide to you. I think governments the world over are also moving too. We've got a handful of them now, and some very close to home. But the standout example, for me anyway, is a very public one, which is the Flanders government in Belgium. And they've now decreed this technology will be the way all citizens are serviced every social service. And before the end of this year, the first such service is going to roll out. Actually, the Prime Minister, Minister President Yambon, who's a big supporter of what we're doing, has said that every baby is going to get this technology. And it's the start of a significant change we're all going to experience. Solid is a technology that works for you in the way that you want. Not the way that things are today, where we have to do what the technology allows us to do. It's the way we could. You know, there's a truism in business that the more you know about your customer, the better you can service them. And I guess that's true, of course it is, but I think we've been applying it incorrectly. We've translated that into get as much data about your consumers as you possibly can, and then try and infer from the data you've got what they're next likely to do. Well, in our world, you don't need to do that. You trade that in for the simple question of can I? Can I see your data? Can I use it to provide you something new? Can I understand you as a consumer, as a citizen, in a way that allows me and you together to have a relationship which you get advantage of and I do too. And that's the world of Solid.
So Solid is more than just a concept or a technology vision. It's more than just a protocol. It's a movement growing every day. It's a vital piece of the third layer of the web. Layer of the web has been missing since 1989, but that we now have. The core Solid protocol is in good shape. It's being developed by the WCC Solid community group. And as you've heard, there's some exciting deployments going on live around the world. If you're a developer, it's time to create apps that access this huge pool of trusted data that people are starting to share. And no need to worry about building the back end for your app. If you're a business or a government, it's time to realize the power of trusted data to build new things, to deliver new value to customers and citizens. No need to worry about the stuff stuck in data silos. Build your strategy around Solid. If you're someone who wants to experience better healthcare, better job creation, better commerce, better government services, it's time to get ready to enjoy a better web. So you see, with the kinds of adoption we talked about, and today coming together into one unified Solid web, the benefit to individuals is immeasurable. You deserve it. We all do.
And we're ready to help. The technology has proven itself. We've got expertise available to help advise, help support. And we have a fast-growing community of developers, corporations, governments, all working on projects. Actually, if you follow this QR code, head to this landing page, we'll see we made something for you all to have a summary of the things we talked about today, more material that I hope you'll find useful. And you'll see the various ways to get in touch with us.
Welcome to the Solid world. I invite you all to come aboard this fast-moving train. Let's get to work. Wired, thanks for having us.
Thank you.